Welcome, welcome.
Thank
Definitely
you.
definitely not a stranger. Very pleased to
Nope.
meet you again. Just to let everybody know, this is Simon he lives in Dominica right now, but originally from the UK, which is exactly where we're taking you to this week. And so I'm gonna let Simon introduce himself to y'all.
Yeah. Hi, I'm Simon. Like Amali said, I'm British. I'm married to someone from California. Our kids are half British, half American, and now also a little bit Dominican. But yeah, I was born in England. I lived there until my late 20s. Yeah, that's my original home.
You're giving people a little bit of insight into your age.
Oh, I know, right? I know. Yeah.
But yes. So how many you travel often? Because I follow your page on IG, thoughtful@thoughtful.travel. And
Yep.
it's a joy watching your family travel through the world. Like I saw y'all went to Morocco. The kids weren't invited to that one though. But I saw
No, they weren't.
Morocco. I saw the A-frame house, your Airbnb that you have in New York. But is it? No, it's
Long Island, just
Long
outside of New York.
Island. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. And then,
yeah.
well, I had the privilege of joining Book of Sins retreat at Seacliff. Your
Yes.
cottages in Dominica, absolutely beautiful.
Thank you.
And so, yeah, how many countries have you traveled to?
My gosh. I should do the maths. I'll go over continents. So I've in Asia, I've been to Thailand, Indonesia, India. Um, I've been to Australia. I've been to Moscow very briefly through the airport. I left the airport. I've
Yeah.
been to Moscow. I've been to Egypt, to Israel, to Jordan. In Africa, I've been to South Africa, Malawi, Zambia. In Europe, I've been to a lot of Europe: Germany, Spain, Greece, Turkey, Croatia.
You lived in the UK, so
Yes, exactly. Easy access. That one was less of a heavy lift. And then obviously the US, Hawaii, yada yada, and then Central America, Mexico, Colombia. Briefly to Brazil. I really, really want to go to South America properly. That I
yeah.
would say is a big gap in my travels. I really, really want to visit South America, and then obviously a bunch of the Caribbean. So I don't know how many that is, but
Yeah,
a bit.
I've lost count, but you know what? It's
Yeah.
actually really like I actually prefer when you tell people because I mean I count how many I keep track of how many countries I've been to, but I
Yes.
really focus on it so much. Like my dream was always to go to the six major continents, and
Right.
we'll make it to
Right.
Antarctica one day. But
Yes.
but like it's not so important for me to like, the number of countries I've been to. Like it's more important that I experience
Right.
places. So I tend to enjoy slow travel a lot more.
Right.
It's always nice to hear instead of somebody saying, okay, I've been to 90 countries, or I've been to 60 countries, and actually hear where they've been to. So you're actually like the first person I've had who's been able to, actually rattle off all the actual countries he's been to instead of just like a number.
Well, I should count up as well. That would be
It's
interesting.
it's signs of a true traveler.
No,
But it's challenging to keep track of how many countries you've been to.
no, that's good.
So did you always dream of leaving the UK and traveling?
I did, as a child, I was obsessed with travel. What I'd be drawing in my notebook in the margins at school was airplanes and palm trees, and I was obsessed with it. And growing up, we used to go regularly to France camping, just in the car and the ferry. And I was always like, I loved it was beautiful looking back, but I was always like, oh, I want to get on a plane. It was all about getting on a plane. I wanted to go really far really far. And it was always things that looked so different from it with the grey skies in England. I was like, I want to go to tropical, exotic places. And so, yes, as soon as I left home at 18, I started traveling. So, yeah, I
Dream
love it.
come true. Or as
Yeah,
you would put it today, the popular word manifestation.
yes, Absolutely. Yeah. Hmm.
So when people hear the UK, most people think about London, um, you know, probably Edinburgh. And where exactly did you grow up in the UK?
Great question. A few places actually. So I was born in Eastbourne on the south coast, which is near Brighton, which some people at least have
Oh,
heard of Brighton,
yes,
because
I've been to
Brighton.
Brighton actually.
There you go. Well, Eastbourne
It's
is
it was
basically
my
like,
first experience going to the sea in a
yes.
coat,
So
in a
I will
winter coat.
yes, I'll straight away apologize for the sea and beach in Brighton, Eastbourne. It is huge rocky pebbles that are so
Hmm.
painful to walk on,
Yeah.
and a kind of grayish sea. Yeah, I'm not. I love Eastbourne. I grew up
Surprisingly,
there, but
when I went, it was Easter, and there was a
okay,
blue hint to the water. There was a nice blue
okay,
hint to the
okay.
water.
No,
Many
and I love.
seagulls or pelicans,
Yeah,
whichever one it was.
okay. Yeah. Okay, all right.
So,
No.
but it was just cold. Like,
Yes. That's definitely a theme. The weather. But Eastbourne till I was 11. Then we lived in North Wales for a bit. Then we lived in the Midlands for a bit, and now my parents live in Shropshire, which is kind of near the Welsh border. Um, Typical, beautiful chocolate country box, whatever you call it, like picture postcard English village where they live now. So that's where I go back and visit. But yeah, then I went to uni. I was in Oxford for uni, and then London for like 10 years of my grown-up life.
right.
So kind of been all over the place.
That's nice. I was following on at thoughtful.travel. Y'all went back for the summer and y'all went to just remind me it was Isle of forgot.
Mull, yes, in Scotland. It's the west coast of Scotland. And actually, when when I was preparing for this and I was thinking about the places I would recommend in the UK, definitely Scotland. And so I'm glad you mentioned Edinburgh, but not just Edinburgh. Edinburgh's amazing, but like
Mhm.
rural Scotland and Isle of Mull, I would really want to fly a flag for the Isle of Mull. I grew up going there. My granny and grandpa had a little very simple little croft, which is kind of what a cottage is called in
Right.
Scotland, up there. And so every summer we would go and spend time there. And so I have all these lovely nostalgic memories. But now we go back every year to the same spot in Mull, and it's still so unchanged. And I compare it a bit to Dominica. You get your beach to yourself on the Isle of Mull. You get your
Yeah.
pristine white sand, your turquoise water. Now the water is freezing cold, even in July and August. So I'm not going to pretend, but it's pristine nature, untouched, and there's not really any humans around. It's if you like your nature unspoiled and to yourself, the Isle of Mull is it's wonderful.
I definitely remember there was a year when Scotland topped like the place to travel. Like I think
Hmm.
probably that would have been 2018, probably somewhere around there. And it was the first time that I learned of how beautiful the beaches are in Scotland. Like, you always think of like the countryside and
Or the
like
mountain, or yes,
mountains and
right,
the lakes and the highlands.
right,
And when I saw that, I was like, beaches? And I'm like, so all the articles actually advertise Scotland as this place where it's all the landscapes you could imagine exist like in
yes,
Scotland. And
yeah,
yeah, that was pretty amazing. Like I went during Easter, so it was cold. It was like no temperature to be anywhere near this
yes,
side or the beaches. But I always thought like if I ever go back through in summer and especially after watching your videos for the Isle,
yeah,
I was like I must go back there. Like I went to the Highlands and I spent most of the time in Edinburgh. But
very good.
yeah,
And I'll
I
say two
love
other things that are magical about Scotland and Mull around there. So, firstly, just how light it is in the summer through the evenings.
right.
Um, like Scandinavia, like the places maybe that are more famous for never really getting dark, Scotland is the same. So it's just mad, like it doesn't get dark till like 9 or 10 at night,
Oh
and then it has this
wow.
wonderful, magical kind of like twilight glow, and so your evenings are so long and your days are so long. It's lovely. And then the other thing is puffin therapy. Puffins are one of the most magical little cute uh land. They fly, but they live on cliffs, and there's a lovely tour you can do from Mull to a little island called Staffa, and you just go and they're very tame. It's very interesting. Like they're protected. It's a preserve. It's this beautiful rocky island in the middle of nowhere you go to, but you can just go and sit on a tuft of grass with a puffin, just arm's length away. And they fly in from the sea with their little fish and they go in their burrows. They're like a cartoon character. They're like make believe. Honestly, it is puffin therapy just to sit and watch them and their colorful eyes and their
Right.
beak and everything. And that for me this year, we did it again this year. I hadn't done it for a few years, and I was like, people need to experience this. This is such a magical little nature moment. Yeah.
That reminds me of like in Tobago, off Tobago, there's a little
Hmm.
island. I think it's little Tobago actually.
Uh-huh.
I think there's also Goat Island, but I think on Little Tobago there is one particular bird that is only indigenous and that lives there. I
Yeah.
think
Yeah.
they don't fly for long distances either, but the way
Uh-huh.
I think they died, they like run and just like fly off cliffs, like the
Yes.
high parts of
Yes.
it. Um, but yeah, and it's a white bird as well too. I must see if I
That's
find out the name.
very cool.
I'm being
Well, I
a
want to go and visit. I want to go and visit there now.
I'm being a terrible ambassador because I don't know the name, but
Yeah. You're
but
forgiven. Fine.
but yes, that just reminded me of it. But yeah, that sounds like puffins do sound like a cartoon character actually.
Mm-hmm.
They could have
Yeah.
their own show like Woody the Woodpecker.
Totally. Well, there's a show on Netflix that my kids loved when they were younger called Puffin Rock, and
Right.
it's all based around this little puffin child, if you will. Yeah.
So so we have Isle of Mull, and that's like Scotland, and we spoke about Brighton. You know where I haven't visited Wales actually. It's the only place in the UK I haven't gone to.
Yeah. Okay.
Uh, How is Wales like? I
Well,
always pictured like still kind of country-ish for some reason.
yes. I mean, Wales in itself has so much variety of terrain for a small, kind of region. That's crazy. We lived in North Wales, which was beautiful. There's a little island which now has a bridge across to it called Anglesey across up there. So there's some really beautiful beaches up there. There's some amazing castles. I mean, there are castles and stately homes obviously everywhere in the UK. And I have to
Yeah.
say, and this might be a later question for you, but what do I love about the UK? Generally, the history. The history
Yeah.
is just unparalleled, and the layers of it, and how ancient it is. And then there's all the other histories in between the.
Medieval and before.
Oh my gosh, it's crazy. There's some amazing castles in Wales. Um, but I tell you, the bit that I haven't been to in Wales that I'm desperate to go to is Pembrokeshire. Like that's
Mm,
in the southern southwest,
right.
and cliffs there, the beaches there look so stunning. And I've yet to visit there. That's on my list of places to go in the UK. Just like so, it's not bad. You didn't know the exact name of that island. Like there are still places in the UK. And again, people might look at the UK from other parts of the world and go, "Oh, that's a small country. You can get around it. You can see everything." But I still really want to go to Pembrokeshire. I haven't been before.
Is there place like is there a difference between because I know there's a place called Pembroke and then there's like all these shares. Like is this like I don't know if you
Yes, but
know, but like is share like a word
it,
that's like a small
yeah. I mean, I guess
version.
it's if anyone reads Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit, it's like the Shire. It's like
Yeah, okay.
yes, it's like it means just like area or county or something like that. So it's just like yes, I guess it just means an area of land.
Okay.
Um,
Yeah, silly
yeah,
question.
because
I like I've
yeah,
always
no, no, no,
wondered
because
about
my
like you have
parents
the
live
name
in
of the
Shropshire.
place and then you'll hear
Yeah,
like the same name and share.
yes, yes, and not every place that's called Shropshire or Herefordshire. Sometimes, like so, Herefordshire, near where my parents live, the capital city is Hereford of that county.
Okay.
But there's other places that there's no Shrop, for Shropshire, so it doesn't always work. But Pembroke, yes, I think there's a Pembroke, yeah. So it sometimes works like that, and sometimes doesn't. Um, yeah.
And then there's England, which most
Yes.
people will just think London. But are there any other
Sure.
places in England that you would like recommend other than London?
Yes, definitely. And it depends on how long you've got there. So I would always recommend you're in the UK. Obviously, always spend a few days in London, a few nights there because there's amazing things there. And then from London, I will just also, you know, give a shout out to our train system in the UK. Our trains are so good and
Yes.
they're slick and they're a beautiful way
Mm-hmm.
of getting around, beautiful views of countryside. That some of the train lines, like the one from London to Edinburgh, goes right by the coast at one point, and you got dramatic views.
Yep.
The ones to the southwest go right by the coast. It's and if you book far enough in advance, it is cheap. So
Mm-hmm.
sure, if you book last minute, it can be expensive. If you're choosing peak rush hour, it's expensive. But if you book in advance and off peak, you get really good deals on trains. Really good because we still use it a lot, and it's super cheap. Um, so I want to talk about two places that are accessible from London. One is further and one is nearer. The further one is Cornwall. That's more like a 6 hour train journey. You know, that's a long train journey, but it's a beautiful one. And Cornwall is so rugged and cliffy, and it's also the warmest of the UK in the summer. So if you're hoping for, I mean, I would never guarantee good weather in England in any time of year, even the summer. Big disclaimer. But you're more likely to find good weather in Cornwall in the summer than anywhere else. And it has these beautiful little quaint ancient villages with old stone houses and winding
Right.
lanes that lead to a little harbor and a cove. There's a whole smuggling history, which is super fun to read about. White sand beaches with arches and caves and um, yeah, Cornwall is really pretty, but there's a slightly more closer spot, Dorset, which is more like just 3 hours from London. And this is what I'd suggest if someone is maybe only got 5 or 6 days in the UK and they're doing a few nights in London. I would really plug Dorset. Um, I've been there before, whatever, but we were there this summer again, so I have lots of fresh recommendations from it. And it, well, first I should say it's great, Amali, that we met on a reading retreat because
I was
books,
going to say that. I was going to say that
yes,
I always
because
wanted to go to Dorset because you read about it so much, especially in the classics, like those classic
yes,
English books. You always
yes.
hear about Dorset.
Totally. And I should say, all the travels that I've really done in my life, I always like reading books set in those places. You know, on thoughtful.travel, my big thing is like bookish travel. It's just like,
Yeah.
what novel can I read that's going to enrich my experience of this location, you know, and just give me its background, give me an access to culture here, a shorthand to culture. I'm here for 3 days, but let me read some books by authors who are from this place, yada
Yeah.
yada. And Thomas Hardy, I don't know, I haven't read loads of Thomas Hardy lately, but I read so much Thomas Hardy at school. Thomas
Right.
Hardy definitely really affected my love of literature when I was a teenager and this and that. Yes, and Dorset is Hardy
Yep.
country and full on Hardy country. Like you are, he wrote so specifically, he named actually, he barely disguised his place names in his fiction. Like you can see all the things that he saw, and a lot of it is not changed. It's been preserved so beautifully. So I had a lot of fun when we were in Dorset, seeing things that I knew were in his books. And I want to also mention something that I've loved discovering in recent years, and it's accommodations. It's called Landmark Trust. Landmark Trust has all these historic, quirky buildings across the UK that you can stay in, and they're affordable. Particularly if you're traveling with a few other people and you split the cost, they're really not expensive. But they're historic gatehouses, they're small little castles, they're follies, they're ancient cottages, they're a converted ancient hospital. Like they're all these quirky spaces that they turned into nice accommodation. It's not super luxe, it's not like crazy, it's not
Yeah.
bougie, it's just really nicely done. But you are staying in history. Like
Hmm.
in Dorset, we stayed in Wolverton Castle Gatehouse, and it's our bedrooms are in a turret. You know that they're circular bedrooms in this ancient turret, and you got a huge fireplace, and you're basically living in a castle for a few nights. And I'm reading, and it was a castle that Thomas Hardy had definitely had tea at, like he'd gone for tea there.
Right.
So I was like, I'm reading Thomas Hardy. I know I
You're
know
in
Thomas.
his book. Like
Yes, I'm literally in his book. He sat over there. I'm here. That's the footpath unchanged through that field. There's Dorchester. There's the church he always talked about, whatever. And so it was, so I love Landmark Trust. Now every year we go back to the UK, we go once or twice a year. I always book a Landmark Trust. I'll find the next funny castle, the next thing, and my parents come and we're there, and the boys love it because there's always a spiral staircase for the kids to explore and a weird dungeon thing or a ping pong table somewhere. And so that for me has been a real unlock for my experience of England lately is this company and finding these super characterful places to stay.
yeah. I was actually gonna ask you that, like, if it is like somebody spending like 2 weeks in England or whatnot, like where would you recommend for them to split up their time? So I'm really glad that you brought that up. That Dorset is like a really good, like you could take a, well, not necessarily a day trip, but you could easily just take the train and spend
Yes,
a few days there as
totally.
well.
Totally. And the coast there is lovely. It has an amazing rock formation called Durdle Door, which is this huge arch. And I will say as well, in the world of Instagram, obviously we're all on this and we love things that just are so visually striking. It photographs so amazingly that arch. To me, it looks like something that should be in Greece or somewhere else, because if the sun is shining, which it might not be, but if the sun is shining, the water there is sparkling blue, and
Right.
this sort of white cliff arch and the beach there, it's so stunning. It's so stunning, and I'd seen pictures. I'd never been until this year, even though it was in all my geography classes. I knew about it before. It's a rock formation that's famous. It really didn't disappoint in real life. I'll say that. I went and I was like, this is beautiful. I was so pleased with the content and the photographs I took of it, but it was just stunning to see it in real life, you know?
I think people forget that the UK is actually an island. Like,
Uh-huh.
so
Yeah.
there would be stunning beach landscapes and seaside landscapes.
Yes.
But more remember like cliff summer here when they think of like the seaside or like those
Mhm.
cliff areas.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's true. It has look, the thing is, swimming is always going to be a bit chilly. So I do understand why people don't think the UK and beach, because they probably want to get in the water, or some
Yeah.
beaches are going to be rocky. Or
Mm-hmm.
but it's the temperature. It's never gonna be warm anywhere to swim in the UK.
But what do you
So
say in summertime you could still like okay, a lot of people may find river water in the Caribbean to be like extremely cold. Like they'll say, no, I'll bathe in the sea, but river water too cold. Like, but you could still like it's refreshing. Like you can still like for some people may compare to an ice bath. Like would you say like in summertime you could still swim in the sea, although it's very cold?
yeah, and people in England are hardy to it. Or in the UK, they're hardy. Okay. But so I will confess. So at Durdle Door, right, we went on a beautiful
Right.
sunny day in July, and there were definitely people swimming. Like, it was sunny, because sometimes it being sunny, right, psychologically, like, okay, it's sunny, so
Mhm.
I'm gonna go for it. But you
Yeah.
definitely still have the when you go in a bit, but then you're in and it's fine. Now, Scotland in the middle of the summer, you will rarely see someone swim unless they're in a wetsuit, because it's genuinely like shockingly ice bath cold in the middle of July, August, warmest it's ever going to get. It's a shock cold. Now,
Yeah.
of course, there's some hardy Scots, and my sister-in-law is famous for like swimming all the time in Scotland when she goes. She's Irish, and she's just like
Right.
very tough. Whereas I in Scotland, I'll run in just to say I've gone in,
Yeah.
and I'll run out again, I'll shout, and I'll run out again, and that's it. Like
That is insane.
yeah,
I would love
yeah.
to swim in this, so swim in the sea. It, that would be an experience, just to say that you did
Yeah,
it.
well, exactly. It feels like an achievement. It feels like something you could show off about. Yeah, yeah,
And I think it's Northern Ireland that is part of the UK, right? Because it's
correct. Yeah,
more the majority, which is more on the south side, that is like the Republic of Ireland. But it's
correct.
Northern Ireland that's part of
Yeah,
the UK. Yeah.
yeah, and beautiful spots there. We have really good friends in Belfast. So we've spent some time in Belfast, which is a beautiful city with super creative, artsy stuff going on, amazing food and restaurant scene. And then in the north, We've been to the north coast of the Northern Ireland, which again is similar kind of cliff, Scottishy
Right.
kind of landscapes, very beautiful. And then Southern Ireland, of course, is famous worldwide for its epic nature and just stunning scenery there as well. So, um, yeah, and I have to also talk about pubs because now I'm
Well,
thinking about Ireland.
I,
You know,
I was gonna ask you, I said for
yeah,
somebody who's come from the UK and who's a guy, you have to be probably the first guy I've heard to who hasn't immediately talked about football. Like,
yes, yes, yeah. Actually, I'm not a football fan, but I'll always be a pub fan. I mean, which of course that can go hand in hand or whatever. But
I'll
I
edit out
love.
that part so nobody comes for you. Like,
No, yeah, yeah. I always try to be honest though, because people always
I
expect me to have
know.
it. Because then Amali, you'd ask me my team, and then I have to just lie, and so I don't want to. But
My
yes, feel free to edit.
Arsenal.
Feel free to edit as you wish. But but pubs are amazing. Pubs are amazing, and I love the fact that they're family friendly. You know, depending which pub you're at, right? But they're mainly family friendly things. I love the beer garden culture. Like when it's sunny in England in the summer, when you're near a pub, you know, just the drinking outside culture, you know, and how, you know, as a kid you can
Yeah.
go in there and it's not some kind of like, you know, weird dodgy thing drinking. It's
Yeah.
just a beautiful communal thing. And then in the winter, like you said, when you were there Easter, when it is bad weather in England, even in the summer, if it's bad weather,
It
pubs are
feels
always so
homely.
cozy.
Mhm.
You can go, you can
It
have your
does.
drink. Even if you don't drink, you can just, it's normally
Mhm.
they're so historic. They've got this incredible history to them. The pubs I love the most are always the historic ones with the big oak beams and the fireplace.
Yep.
And they're so cozy in the winter. They're a little retreat in the summer. They're great for posting up with a pint and your book you're reading. Great place
Mhm.
to read a book if you're traveling alone or you're just bookish or whatever you want to do. They're just and then the ones that you find in the middle of the countryside that are there's nowhere around, all the ones you find on a
Yep.
little Scottish island
I'm a
and
little
they
corner.
always oh my god, yeah, there's always a little nook and a cozy corner to hang out in. So I will say that's one of England's prouder inventions.
My funny enough that I know it's like an English invention, but like my favorite pubs that I went to while I was there was in Scotland.
Yeah. No, well, I mean, you know,
And
I don't know who invented it. Might have been Scott. Do you know what? The first pub could have been in Scotland for all. That's bad that I don't know, but I wouldn't make it just English. It's
yeah,
definitely Irish, definitely like, you know, Welsh, Scottish, all of it, you know?
it was I remember like there was entertainment and there was this guy who was like there was one with bagpipes and
Yes.
like he was singing this song that was really more storytelling. Um,
I love that.
it was
Love
like
that.
had the best whiskey.
You had a great experience, Molly. I know you research your travel well, but it sounds like you went some great places. I haven't had an experience like that in a pub in England, so anyway, in the UK, so I love it. You had a
My
great insight.
my tour, it was a UK tour we did.
Yeah,
It was a story because
love it.
it ended up happening because I went with a friend and we
Mm,
were supposed to do a European tour. And
yeah.
I that's when I learned that the validity on your passport matters because up until then I had only traveled widely through the States and the Caribbean, where they generally don't really check for it. Like you could still get into the US probably with like a month remaining on your passport. You just have to like show, your return ticket. They may question you a bit
Right,
about it, but by and large, okay, fine.
right.
So just make sure that you leave before your passport expires. And
Yeah.
so I think it was a little less than 3 months remaining on my passport, probably. And I didn't realize. So
Hmm.
we got into London actually, and boarding the flight to go to Paris is when they denied me because it's when I learned to go to most of the European countries, you need 6 months validity on your passport. And
Mm.
talk about days of crying, like actual days of crying. So we had to
Oh, that would have.
plan. We had, I think it was 21 days and all. So in 2 days, we had to plan an entire trip in the UK because we were on
Yes.
European tour. It was to cancel all the Airbnbs, the hotel bookings, everything. And we reworked an entire trip for like 20 days across England, Scotland, and
Yes.
Ireland. And
I love that you pivoted because I love plans and I would have been very upset the same as you to and I honestly I don't think I even really knew that. I didn't know that there was strict like that between so that's not
oh yeah.
that's a real trick. People should know that. Like that's
Listen, we went like it was like we tried going to the Italian embassy to see if like they would they would allow us in. And we gave up. We just gave up and we were like, you know what? We're gonna stay in the UK and we're
yeah.
gonna make the most of it. I felt really badly too because I mean this is a trip I planned with somebody. But
Yes. Gosh.
but it turned out to be a really, really beautiful time. Like I
No,
had
that
the best time in the UK that Easter.
no, and you talk about slow travel, like I know you hadn't planned it like that, but you really in 20 days, you get you that's a
Oh,
good that's much more of a sense of culture and a sense of a place, you know.
yeah.
So that I'm sure that was a really beautiful thing about it as well. So yeah.
But yeah. It was so you said history. But
Mhm.
your favorite thing about is your favorite thing about the UK. Anything else? Or
Um
if you want to delve deeper into the history.
I yeah, no, what no, I will say, I'll say just cosmopolitanism and like influence from other countries that are
Mhm.
now like generationally in English society. So honestly, I think our best food in England is curry. In the UK is curry. You know, that's not from us. You know,
Yes.
that's from an Indian population. So I love and I love London for that too. That there's like it's such a melting pot of cultures and races and ethnicities and everything. And I think there's such a freedom. I'm talking about London now, right?
Yeah, yeah. Yeah.
Such a freedom in London to be yourself, you know, and it feels like so open-minded there. And we've lived in New York for 11 years as well, and I'd say similar things about New York, but I would actually say there's something. So even my wife Amber, she used to be a fashion designer. She loves fashion in London more than anywhere else because she says there is such freedom of expression in yeah. And even compared to New York, Amber will say that there's more freedom of people expressing themselves and what they wear in London than she thinks anywhere else. I mean, maybe someone like Berlin might be similar, but there's just such freedom of expression. And that just speaks, I think, for a bigger thing, not just about fashion, but just about freedom of expression and freedom of individuality.
Yeah.
And also, I do think mingling of communities and different cultures. I think some cities and places have lots of pockets all separate of different cultures, but I mean, I don't know, you know, obviously I'm white and I have my own perspective
Oh,
of privilege and majority, but
yeah.
do believe I do believe there's more mingling in London maybe than other places, and I think that's a really beautiful thing. So I love all the influences on the UK from other places that are like go back generations, you know, in terms of culture and food and all sorts of things. I think that's a really a cool thing about the UK.
You're not the first person I've heard say that. And even if you look at pop culture, like Rihanna and all these persons, they tend to prefer London as like a fashion base or the fashion houses there than anywhere in the US, California, New York, it doesn't matter. Like,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah, it's interesting. Um, Yeah, and then I love, but I mean, the history piece. I mean, and then the history piece, how it relates to London, because I lived in London for years. Obviously, love London. Obviously, I would always recommend people spend some time there. The museum game in London is just amazing. I
mhm.
mean, from like from the Tate Modern, you know, like a converted and crazy like power station, you know, that kind of space to the beautiful Victoria and Albert. The V&A Museum is probably my personal favorite because I love the kind of oldie worldy construction, and it's kind of fun that Harrods is across the way and like Fortnum and Mason is around the corner. I mean, by the way, these are not places when I live there that I would ever like shop in. I mean, they're so expensive
Yeah.
and pop, but it's just fun just to walk around Fortnum and Mason, and I love tea. Of course, I'm British, so looking at all the tea packaging and it's all like so beautiful and this and that. But the V&A is amazing because they'll always have like a new exhibition with something really interesting and fresh and relevant, as well as all their incredible back catalog archive of super interesting artwork. And so I think the museum game is really strong in London and super diverse and lots of interesting kind of little pockets of that to explore. Um and then literally talk about bookishness, bookish travels. I mean, there's just like so much
I
So
was
much.
gonna say I fell in love with the bookshops in London. I specifically remember spending an entire day getting lost in bookshops.
Yeah. I mean, that is magical. And then obviously just so much, so many authors over such a long period that you could dip into. If you want to read some Dickens and get your London vibes from that as you're traveling, if you want to read White Teeth by Zadie Smith, and like that's your London like influence. And in fact, on this last trip this summer there, I'm now just enjoying the sort of Caribbean London connections. And so I was reading Lonely Londoners by Sam Selvon like this, and I now want to read all his books. And I mean, it also makes me want to visit Trinidad. Another reason why I want to visit Trinidad, because he's such an amazing writer. And we literally, our train came in from Dorset to Waterloo, which is how Lonely Londoners starts, with him in Waterloo Station. And so I've got goosebumps talking about it. So it's just so beautiful to read that book, and I don't want to in any way not just beautiful. I mean, like the incredible hardship of being, during that generation, being from the Caribbean and trying to make your way in like an incredibly racist, you like whatever society in London. I mean, also just the tragedy and the heartache of his group of, of Caribbean diaspora trying to make their way. But it was such an insight. Talk about trying to understand culture that's not me as a white guy in like 2023. It just took me somewhere so different and so deeper for me to understand something there, so.
And there's a bunch of Caribbean literature that covers the Windrush period after
Yes.
the Second World War, with how many Caribbean people went across to try and rebuild the country. Well, not to try, rebuild the country.
Yes, totally. No, I mean the history of it, there's so many twists and turns, and like, yeah. But now, now living in the Caribbean, it just, again, a different perspective for me to learn about culture here in Dominica, and then traveling in the Caribbean a bit as well. And that's why I so want to come to Trinidad, because there's everywhere has its own unique mix
Yeah.
and history and background, and yeah. So I find, trying to locate those kind of pieces, those authors, really helps open my mind and eyes more and more to the places I'm seeing, you know.
In Dominica, like when I came, the thing that shocked me the most, I mean, I knew it was between Martinique and Guadeloupe, but I still never realized how much of a French influence it had. Like,
Yes.
I still thought of it as something like more of English influence or British influence. And when I actually, which is why it's so important to visit countries, because it literally changes your perspective or any wrong ideas that you may have had about a country.
Yes, totally. You're right. And I probably would have thought the same thing. And like I had heard that, oh, they play cricket in Dominica. Okay, British,
Yeah.
oh, there's some British products in the stores here. But you're right. I would say overall bigger influence, vibe, place names, the second language being Creole, which is obviously French connected. I would say way more French influence here. And I kind of love that, because I mean, although the Brits tried to do a horrible colonizing job here, they just didn't, kind of failed with any
Yeah.
lasting like any lasting impact, in a way that I'm like, good, because it
Yeah,
allows some, obviously it allows an indigenous culture to be more prevalent now here. And
for sure.
yes, England did not manage to whitewash the
That
place.
is true. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, they did lots of horrible things which are still, being sorted out. I'm not trying to say that, but I don't know. I like in a sense
Yeah.
that, yeah.
No, you're right. You're right. As you just mentioned, I forgot to bring it up, probably because I'm not so much into the sport. But you're not into football. Are you into cricket?
I'll tell you what. I went to boarding school in England,
Right.
uh, where I was forced to play every sport every day, time, and I blame that. I don't think I'm naturally sporty anyway, but
Right.
then being forced to play it, like rugby in the winter when it's just pouring with rain, it's freezing, and it's just mud. That's grim. Cricket was just boring for me, because at least it wasn't cold, but I'm just standing on this pitch for hours and hours and hours and hours and hours and hours. And hours. So I no. So tennis, I like. I'm like this one. Tennis, I enjoy.
Okay.
I'm not good at it, but I like having a hit around, and I like
Right.
watching it. So I'll take tennis as a British sport that I do enjoy watching, at least.
By the time I launch this episode, the Sports Federation is gonna come for you, Simon.
It's true, it's bad. But look, Wimbledon, I'm flying my flag for Wimbledon and tennis. That's a big export for the UK. So, it's all good.
For sure. That's interesting. As we're talking about history and now sport, like I know the history of football. Like I think there's actually a series on Netflix that dives into it. And then I know the history of cricket, of course. But I don't think I've ever watched like the history of tennis. Like I know that it's an export of like UK and the culture is really large there, but I've never
Yes.
watched the history of tennis.
Well, I'm gonna butcher it, but I do. There's a thing called real tennis, which I might be wrong, but I think it was
Right.
the original precursor of what's now called tennis. And I do believe that like Henry VIII was playing real tennis at Hampton Court Palace, and it was this super historic game. It
Okay.
was indoor. It's a thing. It's still played in very niche circles. And then I also know that tennis on a grass court is the real elite thing in the UK, right? So that's obviously Wimbledon, but like even the boarding school I went to was did have a grass court. I mean, not super maintained or whatever.
Right.
And I'll disclaimer by saying that my parents are teachers. They were teachers in the boarding school system.
Okay.
So that is why we got a big reduction on fees. So I'm just trying to
Right.
disclaim the fact that I'm not super posh. But anyway, but in the boarding school that I went to, which with discounted fees, I did like that because playing on grass is kind of cool. It's different than clay and hard
For sure.
surfaces, and it's cool, and it's just not. It feels more naturey. Like you're in nature, you're out, and there's lovely green grass, and you're hitting the racket back and forth and
Breeze,
stuff.
the
So
wind.
yeah, so I did. I That was my window of enjoying a sport in England in school was tennis.
It's good to know. It's good to know that you have at least one favorite sport, even if it's the
Yes,
only sport that you.
yes, and I'm not good at it, but at least I can appreciate it and watch it. Yes, you're right.
I'm
Well,
a,
no, I'm going to ask you. What sport are you into, Amali? What
I'm
playing or watching?
I'm not a sports fan, like per se,
Yes.
like of any one particular sport. Growing up in high school, I played a bit of hockey,
Okay.
then indoor hockey. And then I did play tennis at one point in time, in my early teens. What
Yeah.
else did I play? I never played football, but I enjoy watching football. Like in terms of
Okay.
probably my favorite sport to watch would be football.
All
Um,
right.
I do have an ex that was like heavily into basketball. So,
All right. All right. So
like,
you, as a
I
result of that
watched and
affiliation.
I got into basketball just
Yeah.
by, association for a
Yes.
bit. But I would say I enjoy any sport. Like, I mean, except
Mm.
test cricket. Like, it's too long. It's too long.
Right.
Uh,
Yes. Agreed
but
about that.
I do, and I could get into like watching any sport, baseball, whatever. Like I've been to a baseball match knowing nothing much about baseball and was in the stands, like, just supporting a team and like,
Yeah.
having fun. But
Yeah.
I'm not a sports fan of any one particular sport. Like I
Good.
could enjoy
Okay.
an event. It could be from track and field and all, even if you wanna like count that. But yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm not
Yeah. Yeah.
heavy into any one thing.
Got it. All right. Good to know.
Well, so we were talking about curry before. What is your favorite food?
I actually I would say curry.
Yeah,
Even in the state, even in New York, I really missed a good British curry. A good
right.
curry. I would say that number one. But I would say number two, I love a fish and chips. A good, solid, with the
Yeah,
right amount of vinegar on it and then right
yeah.
amount of salt, the batter just right. And then obviously if it's served in a bit of old newspaper, even better, the proper legit.
I haven't had a proper fish and chips. And I think
Okay.
that's the reason why I can't say I like it. Like I think whatever I try, like I had a fish and chips in Brighton, I had fish
Mm.
and chips in London, I had fish and chips somewhere else. And like none of it just I don't know if that was the Caribbean and me,
Okay,
but
yeah, it might be
but
because I know you have such a strong fish game in the Caribbean, so it might
yeah.
be tricky
But
to
it's
compete.
so like I love fish and I don't necessarily need my fish to be heavily seasoned. So where would
I
you say I could get a good fish and chips?
Yeah, but okay, now though, the cream tea, I actually almost that needs to the cream. I don't know if you had it when you had the scone with the clotted cream and the
No,
jam.
no.
Okay, it's more of a summery thing, so maybe when you were there, it's
Right.
being pushed. but the clotted cream is a cream that really it only exists in the UK. I've tried to find it in the States. I tried to find it in New York.
Right.
It's the special kind of way of making cream. It's so thick and creamy, and it goes on the freshly baked scone, different from American scone, not like a scone like
Right.
it's fluffy. It's very fluffy scone, very buttery, fluffy. And then the jam, the locally made, amazing fresh strawberry
Great.
jam, and obviously it's one thing I'd recommend for London too. The posher places like the Ritz and all these places, they always
Right.
have a cream tea serving, and it's always worth it. It's pricey, but
Yeah.
at hotels they in London they do it with like little cucumber sandwiches, and it
Yeah.
looks beautiful. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So that I'd always recommend in London. Do a cream tea a splash out on a cream tea at a posh. You might be staying in a super cheap Airbnb, but go and have you a
Yeah.
cream somewhere and feel
The
like you're posh.
experience. Get the
Yeah, yeah.
experience.
But even just
Cool.
informal in Dorset, you could just get the cream tea on its own. Just so
Right.
that I also love.
So you said a British curry. Is British curry more on the authentic Indian side curry? Is it a mix? Is it its own special?
Well, here's what I'd say. I'd say there's so many generations of like Indian community in the UK that it's become its own thing. Because when I went to
Okay.
India, it was nothing like. It was like real Indian
Right.
curry. It was spicier. It was different flavors. So no, for sure, British curry has had its own evolution over the generations to become its own thing, right? And so it's very different from what I ate in India. And I love the Indian curry when I was in India too, of course. I mean, it's
Right.
amazing. But I love, and I guess some of them are milder, so I'm not a super spice. I like a bit of spice.
Right.
Say a lot of the British curry is a bit milder. And then it's all the trimmings, Amali. It's like the onion bhajis, it's the deep fried things, it's the poppadoms, it's the naan bread, it's the peshwar. It's like my favorite one is the peshwari naan, especially like a dessert. It's like
Mhm.
coconut in a naan bread, and it's so all fresh and puffy. So good.
That's what I was also gonna ask. I was like, is it like Caribbean curry? But now I'm like, no, that's not Caribbean curry either.
No, it's got its thing, and obviously in Dominica we'll have a lovely roti, and we'll have our Trinidad because in the Caribbean, obviously the Trinidadian Indian connections are the closest we're going to get here, and I love all that. But it's different again. It's got its own thing.
I think I
Yeah.
learned something new. Like I
No,
never realized that like British curry was its own curry. Like, and I was speaking to somebody the other day, and I was like, it's amazing that curries all over the world are different. Like, like I mean, I guess it was originally an Indian thing, and then
right,
from like migratory patterns around the world, everybody just made it their own.
right. And then if you're going to eat it anywhere in the UK, go to Brick Lane in East London. That is the famous street. Any curry house on Brick Lane is where you really want to do it right and proper,
Yeah.
and your experience, and in Brick Lane,
When
it's
I go back.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
And where will I get a good fish and chips?
Honestly, anywhere.
No,
I mean, anywhere. But my
anywhere.
favorite place, so we call them chippies, right? A fish and chip is called a chippy. The best chippy in my mind is at the seaside in a smaller
Right.
English town where there's maybe just one chippy. So find a town because every English town has a chippy and a Chinese takeaway, right? Every single one ever, and then probably a curry house as well. But find a town that has just one chippy because then you'll know, okay, there's just the one. It's doing its thing. It's doing well, and yeah, because eating it by the seaside, I don't know, it's fish, it's near the sea. That's what I'd say. But, and then obviously local guidebooks will tell you and where to get it. And then the cream tea as well. Great in the countryside. Yeah, a little tea shop. Because I will say one other thing I love about England. I love the tradition of eating sweet biscuit cake things
Mm-hmm.
at like multiple times in the day. So it's like 11, we have a thing called 11s. I don't know if you came across when you were there. 11s is when you're allowed to have lots of like sweet we call them biscuits, Americans call them cookies. And
Elevenses.
cake. Yes, at 11 o'clock in the morning you have your cup of tea.
Oh, and
Your
it's
cup
called
of
elevenses.
It's what 11s is. It's a cup of tea, of course, but with the cup of tea comes the allowance to have chocolate digestive biscuits, or a big
Right.
old slice of cake. And then again, you have a cup of tea with lunch, of course, after lunch, that's a cup of tea. Then at 4 o'clock again, it's afternoon tea, and it's a cup of tea with another slice of cake, more biscuits. So honestly, I actually do put on weight when I go to the UK for any bit of time because I'm just like, it's allowed to have sweet chocolatey things throughout the day. Love that.
But interestingly enough, like I've realized, quote unquote, healthy cultures they all do allow for a bit of sugar though. Like
Yes.
I
Yes.
guess everything in moderation. Because I
Yeah.
just a side point, like when I went to Japan, that was like a huge culture shock to me of how
Hmm.
much sugar they consume. Like they are huge on desserts, like even souvenirs. Everything is cookies and just
Yes.
these sugary sweets and whatnot. And I'm like, but these are supposed to be some of the healthiest people in the world. What are we Americanized Western world
Uh-huh.
people getting wrong?
Yeah. No, it's interesting. You're right. You find out these little things that aren't
Because
countries not.
like
Yeah.
tea is a healthy thing. Like tea is a
Yeah.
healthy thing, but they couple it with sweets, like
Yeah.
biscuits and whatnot. But it
Absolutely.
works.
Gotta find your treats. Yeah.
I didn't go to any 11s, but it definitely sounds like I always tell my mother that she's a British person at heart because she's obsessed with tea.
There you go.
So I know for sure she'll enjoy 11s.
Yes. It's a legit thing you could tell her she can do now and she can feel great about it.
What is your favorite as we are talking about books and stuff? It's gonna be a very hard question. If you don't have one, feel free to mention a few. What's your favorite British book?
That is hard. I feel like it's gonna be just something I've read more recently. Like I know I mentioned White Teeth already, but I'm reading Zadie Smith's latest one, The Fraud, right now and loving it. Partly again because it has this Jamaican story, so it's kind of tied back to the Caribbean, but it's set in the UK. She is great. Um, I'm always looking. Yeah, it's funny. Over the years, it would have been all different. Like I was so into Jane Austen when I was like doing my A levels and sixth form at school. I thought I read all the Jane Austens. I was then really into Oscar Wilde when I was at uni, and I did my dissertation on Oscar Wilde. Partly because he's not written that much, and I was like could read all of them and like not be overwhelmed. Um, but then I love a good Daphne du Maurier. I love Rebecca, like and like all her. And so her books are set in Cornwall, so that she's a great one to read if you're visiting Cornwall, and it's all smugglers and all that kind of like that good stuff. So there's a bunch, and then back in the day, I loved reading Shakespeare. That honestly, these days I find it a little harder to read. I've just been too contemporarized with
Yeah.
my reading.
I think the
Um,
education system spoiled it.
yeah, yeah, it's true. So these days, I do think in terms of like modern British writers, like Zadie Smith is up there. I love her. Folks like that who are writing just like great books that are giving us different cultural insights into the UK as well.
So if I like, I mean, of course it's English speaking, and it's probably one of the best things that colonization ever brought us. Being able to speak English, bro. If there was ever benefited, that would be one. But what's a saying synonymous with the UK? It could be like England or anything. You
Yeah,
there.
that's a good question. I quite like this is a phrase that just sums up our national character a little bit. Like when people ask me how I'm doing, so not too bad, not too bad. And
Right.
that it's just sort of like negative, you know what I mean? Because UK's known for being a little bit like downbeat, and we're a little bit, we
Yeah.
don't like to blow our own trumpet. We're modest to a fault. Like we're false modest, we're sort
Yeah.
of really put ourselves down. And anyone who's vaguely showing off, we think that's an American thing. Oh, Americans like boast it. And I'm married to an American, right? So I'm not trying to
Yeah.
say that's true, but it's a cliche that Brits think Americans show off. And so they're not too bad because often when I'd use that in America, people would look at me and be like, well, are you good? Or I mean, not too bad. That's such a negative phrase. So I'm not too bad. And it even could be worse. Like that's another phrase people are saying. It could
Right.
be worse. And it's sort of like, oh, a bit of a downer.
Well, they've
But then
definitely passed that on to us because I've never noticed. And I guess probably because all of my American friends are like have Trini or Caribbean influence too, so nobody ever
yeah,
looked at me weird
yeah,
when I say, but I never picked up on that, because that's
yeah.
also like normal things that we say here
Right.
as well.
And then the other thing that, on a more positive note, I like the word brilliant. No one says that in the States. I've lived there for 11 years.
Yeah,
No one
that's
says
true.
that. I like that word, brilliant.
That
Because
is true.
and it can be thrown away to throw away. Oh, brilliant. And then, oh,
Yeah.
brill. No, I love that word, and that feels very British to me. And I don't really hear Americans say that. Or other cultures like brilliant, and so we can be positive too. You know.
I think my favorite thing about the UK is a strange thing to say is the dry sense of humor.
Mm.
Because I have a dry sense of humor. I
Hmm.
appreciate the dry sense of humor.
No, you're right. I'm glad you do because some people are just offended by it. You know,
Yeah.
so that I'm glad you appreciate. No, I still having not lived in the UK for years, I have a regular diet of British comedy and comedy that just didn't translate. So some British comedy gets remade or whatever, like The Office
Hmm.
goes to the States.
Yeah.
So much British comedy does not work in other cultures. Well, certainly not in the States. And I have my regular diet of like old classic British stuff that's just a bit off and a bit quirky and just a bit weird
Old
and dark
ones. I
and
think
twisted.
isn't was Aloe Aloe British, right?
Yes, I
Yes.
mean that's
Like
also horribly,
I,
horribly racist. So
yes.
I'm not necessarily going to talk about that one, but yes, I mean in its time, sure, that was what we'd watch.
Yes,
But
it was hilarious.
God, yes, no, but I like. There's a thing called Alan Partridge, which is like a spoof on a chat show host,
Yeah.
and that never made it to the States. I mean, the actor
I
has been in.
know.
Yeah, yeah. There are things like that, like just. And then there was a terrible. This is kind of. I mean, it doesn't translate. It's very canned laughter sitcom, but there was a thing called Keeping Up Appearances, and it was
Hmm.
like a actually it did I have some Dominican friends who are a bit older than me who said it got shown on Dominican like
Hmm.
TV because I
Yeah.
think it rang a bell with Dominicans who had a connection to the UK, and it's all this. It's a lower middle class woman who has all these aspirations of being more posher, so her name is Bucket but she says pronounced bouquet,
Yeah.
and she answers the phone.
My mom watched that actually.
Yes, that's the generation. But as a kid, as a 10-year-old, I'm showing my age again.
Yeah,
I
for
was watching
sure.
that when I was like 10. And it's all very innocent humor. And look at all probably all lots of whole like weird offensive stuff in it. But it was just it summed up the British class system. It was really there's this it had a lot to say. And apparently it was the Queen Mother's, the former Queen Mother who's now deceased. It was her favorite show. And it just says something about, British class.
Be remiss of me not to ask you, what are your views on the crown?
Oh, I mean, I love the
We
series.
went there. I mean, we're already talking about like
I know. I knew as soon as I
yeah.
said that you're going to ask me about the royal family. My wife, who's American, is not a big royals fan at all. Obviously, we
Right.
both loved watching The Crown. That was like amazing.
Right.
And then there's another great comedy which you might enjoy. You will enjoy this actually if you like the dry sense of humor. It's called The Windsors. It's a few years old now, but it aired on Channel 4 on the UK. But you can just find it on. It's on Netflix. Look up The Windsors on Netflix. So it's a total pastiche of the royal family, but slapstick comedy humor,
Right.
but great actors in it. You'll recognize some of the actors in it. And it's like Eugenie and Beatrice. It's like, Fergie's kids, and it's all the royal family. And they reference the crown. They're
Right.
like, oh, I didn't even get a storyline in the crown. Like slapstick humor, but very good impersonations and such. It's
Right.
really funny. So I don't mind the royals. Like my wife is not into it.
Right.
I still believe there's something to be said for the royal family, a lot to do with tourism, honestly. and the attractive, but obviously I'm the first one to have a good old laugh, and the Windsors is just poking fun mercilessly the whole time, and I think it's hilarious. So I'm kind of in the middle. I could go either way on with my opinions, but
I mean, I'm definitely not a fan of colonization. Have to choose words so carefully, but I'll leave it there.
no, but I will quickly say that as well about yes, the royal family, anything the royal family having to do with colonization, it was absolutely horrendous. I mean, I'm never going to be an advocate of that at all. If they'd stayed within their own lands, I think that would have been yeah, no, I definitely am not. That was
I just
never.
I see them as like another kingdom that was like part of um history. Like
Yeah,
you hate
yeah,
the horrible things they did, and everything else is pop culture and for gossip.
yeah, yeah. No, that's definitely yeah. No, that is true. Um, but I definitely feel, even as a white British person living in the Caribbean, I feel just like the horrendousness of stepping into this history of just like yeah, seizing land, behaving absolutely like obviously enslavement, like just such incredibly like horrendous aspects of history that I definitely am mindful of that, and even just
Yeah.
how we operate now of just this horrendous history of coming to places that were not ours and
But that's
doing
like
awful things.
mostly like the history of this kind of, you kind of just feel that, I could be wrong, but you kind of just feel it like in London. Like, I mean, so much of the UK, I feel like that isn't part of their history. Like,
Mhm.
like when you're
You
like, I don't know,
hope
I could
so.
be
But
wrong.
but Amali, so many port cities were such
Right.
centers for the slave trade. Like my
Okay.
good friend is from Bristol. Like Bristol has in this sort of near southwest of England has
Right.
like a horrible history of slave trade, and then Liverpool has a horrible history of slave trade, and but then all but then so many stately homes in the UK are funded from plantations
Well, yeah, for
in
sure.
the so you just have to not even scratch the surface a second. And something I'm really aware of as I now visit stately homes in the UK, and I used to be, to my own shame and ignorance, just not super aware of where wealth was coming from
Yeah.
or this, like those stately homes and the National Trust, which is the main stately home kind of place where you go and see, they are at least trying to have way more explanation and transparency of like what
Right.
money built this. Let's not just take a picture and have a wedding in this big castle. What built this castle? Oh, it was based
That's
on
that's how I feel.
slavery.
I feel like when you're in London, you go to Buckingham Palace and these places, like, yeah, you feel the strong sense of like, okay, yeah, this was built from slavery and whatnot. But then I feel like when you go to like the other places, you kind of just immediately go back to medieval times. Like you forget what actually built these places. Like you don't,
Yes,
the colonization era feel like you just go back to medieval Game of Thrones, like one of these
yes.
times, and you
And you're
feel
right.
like,
A lot of those castles are that age. You're totally right. That's only about the layers.
yeah,
Yes, some of those ruins and those things, but then you've got all the ones that were built in like all the kind of Downton Abbey
yeah.
kind of. They were all.
Mhm.
That's mainly so many of that's from plantation
But
finances.
they leave out that part of like history, as I said, like you feel more like
Yeah.
they call the midwife kind of era.
Yes. No, lots of them do, but some at least are getting better at talking about it now. I
It's
mean,
good to know.
yeah, yeah, because they have to. You can't charge a ticket fee for someone to look around the historic house and not talk about this enormous part of why it's even there. So some, not all at all. Some are definitely getting better at talking about it.
It's definitely like the UK will always remain like somewhere high up on the tourist list. Like
Mhm.
high up on places to visit. As you said, I like that you said that history is your favorite thing about your country because the layers, you are correct. The layers, you could
Yeah.
pass through so many time periods just
Yes.
visiting the UK.
Yes. Seriously. No, it's crazy. Yeah. Yeah. It really is.
Well,
Yeah.
for my listeners, I'm just, you all know I always give you all the inside scoop on flights. So from Miami Airport and JFK in New York in May, because we always encourage to book your travel early, you can get flights for as cheap as 650 US round trip. And this will be to LGW, Gatwick. And then from in Europe, you all know the insanely cheap prices. So from a lot of the airports, including like Paris, CDG, you can get flights round trip for as cheap as 70 to 75 US return. So definitely take advantage of it. And of course, you know where to get your information on skyscanner.com. Thank you so, so, so much for doing this. I enjoyed chatting with you. Like,
Yes. Me
that's my
too. I really
favorite
enjoyed
part
it.
about this. Like, just, and there's a special light that comes out of people when they're talking about their home country. Like,
Yes. No, I agree. I love it. I love the UK. So thank you for having me. I really enjoyed talking as well. It's been really fun.